Hello, and welcome to History Test, where we teach you everything you need to know for your upcoming test.
In this video, we will be doing an overview of World War II. This is the third and final in the trilogy of videos we will be doing about World War I, the interwar years, and World War II.
Alright, let's get started.
What's the big deal about World War II anyway?
Well, first, there was the devastating world conflicts. For example, there was fighting in Europe, Asia, Africa, the Atlantic, and the Pacific.
World War II also completes the decline of the European world dominance that had begun in World War I.
Oh yeah, and the Cold War also emerges during World War II. So, how did it start anyway?
There are many different theories of how World War II started, but we're only going to talk about three of them.
First was the end of World War I. It created financial difficulties for the Treaty of Versailles.
Second is aggressive territorial ambitions. The Germans wanted Lebensraum and the Japanese wanted resources and colonies,
which put them at odds with France, Britain, the USSR, China, and the US.
Last cause is German and Japanese belief of racial and cultural superiority. Both of the states imposed racial hierarchy.
Specifically in Europe, there were some events that caused the war to start.
Plans to build a third Reich was the first cause. There were two Reichs, or empires, that existed before that.
The Holy Roman Empire and the Otto von Bismarck's Germany.
Hitler rebuilt the German army and made it stronger.
But while he was doing that, he violated the Treaty of Versailles!
While building up the army, Hitler stopped paying reparations for World War I and put the owed £6.6 billion or 9.95 billion American dollars back into Germany's economy.
And while he did this, Britain and France didn't act against it at all.
Why wouldn't they do something, you ask?
Well, for one thing, both countries thought Hitler would take action against the communist menace of the USSR. But unfortunately, Stalin and Hitler became allies in August of 1939, and the chance of that went down the drain.
There was also the fact that Britain and France didn't want to start another war because the effects of World War I were so terrible, and they were afraid that if they did start a war, no other countries would back them up.
The German army was fierce, and no one wanted to mess with them.
Speaking of which, Hitler annexes Austria and threatens to take it by force in 1938.
Austria gives in as the beginning of Germany's powerful rampage.
Dun, dun, dun!
In 1938, Hitler met with Chamberlain and the French Daladier Munich as a part of the Sudeten appeasement, and they both agreed not to stop Hitler.
But the Czechs owned Sudeten and had no say in the decision.
And they were told that they would have to fight Germany alone if they were going to fight back at all.
Back in Britain, there was a major disagreement.
Two high figures, Chamberlain and Churchill, were arguing their views of Hitler.
Chamberlain said he was good. We have peace in our time.
But Churchill pointed out that Hitler had been a problem for 5 years now.
Meanwhile,
Go, Axis powers!
Yes, the Axis was formed. The Axis was formed from the countries Japan and Germany, and later Italy in 1937.
The Axis agreed to fight the USSR and their acts of communism, and Hitler attacked Russia, although they agreed not to attack each other.
Man, Hitler was diverse.
Was that a sausage pun?
Maybe.
Anyway, in September of 1939, Hitler also attacks Poland. This is known as Blitzkrieg, or the Lightning War.
Because it was fast.
3 days later, Britain and France declare war on Germany. But alas, Germany takes Denmark and Norway in 1940.
Hitler took Poland, but he was still hungry.
Finally, Hitler took France in May of 1940 and attacked the Netherlands, Belgium, and Ardennes.
300,000 troops were trapped in Dunkirk.
France surrenders on June 22nd, and the Battle of Britain occurred in October 1940.
Germany wanted to take Britain, but they failed.
Ha ha!
This started the London Blitz, the terror campaign that didn't work.
There were air raids that lasted 57 days where Britain was bombed either during the day or during the night.
But, like we said, that failed and Hitler moves on.
June of 1941, Hitler invades the USSR, specifically Barbarossa.
Lies! Don't trust Hitler!
There were 3 million Germans that invaded, but they couldn't take Leningrad and Moscow before the winter.
Now in Japan,
Japan moved its forces to French Indochina, or, Vietnam.
The U.S. retaliates by closing off trades of oil to Japan because they wanted to slow down military, and they agreed to try to have a peace talk.
But of course, there is no peace, and Japan attacks Pearl Harbor.
That results in 2,400 U.S. soldiers dead, 200 aircraft carriers destroyed, and 8 battleship casualties.
And with that, the U.S. declares war on December 8th, 1941. Pearl Harbor was the event that got the U.S. in the war.
Dun, dun, dun.
Involvement was the key to winning the war.
Here's the key to winning.
The theaters of fighting were...
Wait, do you mean areas of fighting?
It's the same thing. Now let's get back to saying the theaters.
areas.
Whatever.
Atlantic,
North Africa.
Europe.
Pacific.
The players were... Guys!
Yeah,
sorry.
The players. They were,
Axis.
and the Allies.
Which consisted of Britain, Soviet Union, U.S., and France.
In Europe, Germany had set its sight on Russia, specifically Stalingrad.
The city was bombed to ruins.
But the Soviets refused to surrender.
Darn, Soviets!
Zhukov leads an army to counterattack, which leads to the Germans being surrounded.
But again, Hitler refuses to surrender, and 90,000 Axis prisoners were captured.
1 million Soviets were killed.
In the Pacific theater, Japan ruled the Pacific Ocean.
They conquered Singapore, Hong Kong, Burma, and many other islands.
There was a battle called the Battle of Coral Sea, which was basically the naval aircraft carrier battle.
The U.S. loses more aircraft than Japan.
In another battle, the Battle of Midway, the U.S. cracks the Japanese code and was able to determine the location and times of the attacks. And with that advantage, the U.S. was able to get up.
The Japanese lost 4 carriers.
Back in the European theater,
D-Day occurred on June 6, 1944.
150,000 troops were stationed at Normandy, and there were 1 million troops on the beach by July. The reason for why they were fighting in Normandy is because they were close to the English Channel, and it had easy ship access.
the final German attack
Finally,
was December of 1944.
400,000 German troops fought in the Battle of the Bulge, which made Berlin surrender in 1945.
Soviets find Hitler's body in a small bunker.
Germany surrendered on May 7th, 1945, and the day after was V-Day.
A day where everyone in Europe rushed out into the streets and celebrated.
There was much rejoicing.
Yay! The Holocaust had been confirmed, and they discovered Auschwitz and the Buchenwald concentration camps.
6 million Jews had been killed.
Back in the Pacific Theater, there was a first fire bombing in Tokyo.
In March of 1945, 2,000 tons of flammable bombs were dropped and incinerated 16 square miles of Tokyo.
80,000 to 130,000 civilians died.
More bombs were created in America with the Manhattan Project, which forced on making nuclear bombs.
If you've ever seen Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, it's the same project that's featured in that movie.
That never made sense to me. I mean, a fridge wouldn't protect someone from a regular bomb, let alone an atomic bomb.
Now that you mention that...
Guys, let's get back to the war.
Right! Truman had just become president and had no idea about the project.
The first bomb they created is ready to go in 45.
But the problem is that Germany surrendered in 45, so there's no point in using it on them.
They decided not to use the bomb on the Germans, but on the Japanese.
The Japanese wouldn't surrender, and an invasion would cost so many American lives that it wasn't worth it.
The U.S. sent out threats, but didn't mention having a bomb.
On August 6, 1945, Hiroshima was bombed with Little Boy, which was a small and thin-shaped bomb. 7,000 were killed instantly.
3 days after the attack, U.S. used the bomb called Fat Man to bomb Nagasaki.
75,000 civilians were killed instantly, and Hirohito the emperor had no choice but to surrender on August 15th, 1945. Now you know everything you need to know for your
History test. Good luck!
All the information in this video was gathered from Mr. Hansen's World History class.
Thank you, Mr. Hansen!